everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. We're here for the dramatic conclusion of this unit as we start talking about two new presidents today. But before we can start talking about the new presidents, let's talk about the existing one, the one we've been talking about, Theodore Roosevelt. So Theodore Roosevelt at this point is 1908. Theodore Roosevelt, he took over for McKinley when McKinley was assassinated. In 1904, he ran for re-election, won convincingly. So there's no rule at the time saying that he can't run again. So the question becomes, is he going to run? Nobody's ever run for like a third term, but the question is, he took over a year into McKinley's second term, so he technically has only run in one election. So is Theodore Roosevelt going to run for technically would be a third term in 1908? Well, when he ran in 1904, he promised everybody if they elected him, he would not try to run again in 1908. So he wins in 1904, and he is loved. Well, in 1908, he keeps his word. He's like, I'm not going to run again. And they're like, oh, who do we vote for? So he's like, give me a second, and I'll get you an answer to that. So Roosevelt, he goes, and he's going to talk to his good buddy, Taft. All right? And that's where we're going to pick up at today. So let me make myself a little smaller here. Beep, 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 beep. So let me show you a picture here of Taft. This is Taft, right? Taft and his wife. So Taft, he's always been a little bit of a chubby guy. It's kind of the thing that people associate with Taft, but there's more to that story there. So Roosevelt goes to Taft. Now, Taft is a very smart, legally minded man, and he's a good friend of Roosevelt. He's been a big part of his administration. And Roosevelt's like, hey, Taft, because Roosevelt's always jacked up on coffee. Roosevelt's like, hey, Taft, want you to be the next president. And Taft is like, oh. Now, Taft, he actually wants to be a Supreme Court justice one day, all right? So he's like, I don't know. I don't really want to be the president. And Roosevelt's like, oh, man, come on, you got to be the president. And Taft's like, no, I'm sorry, I appreciate it, but that's not really what I want to do. And Roosevelt's like, all right, man, well, if you change your mind, let me know. So Taft goes home that night, and he sits down to eat dinner with his wife. This is his wife right here. And she's like, all right, honey, how was your day? He's like, well, I had a tuna sandwich for breakfast. I had half a turkey for lunch. Roosevelt asked me to be the president. I told him I didn't want to, and now we're sitting down here eating more tuna salad. She's like, what'd you say? He's like, that I had half a turkey for lunch? She's like, no, about the president thing. And he said, yeah, he asked me to be the president. I said I didn't want it. And she said, oh, no, sir, mister. You're going to walk your happy butt back in there tomorrow, and you're going to tell Mr. Roosevelt you would love his endorsement for the president because you will be the next president of the United States because I will be the first lady. All right? So he's like, yes, ma'am. So Taft goes back to Roosevelt and says, my wife says I have to be the president. And Roosevelt's like, fantastic. So the reason this is an important story is the entire reason that Taft wants to become president is because his wife wants to be the first lady. All right? So he reluctantly agrees to be the president. He doesn't want to be the president, remember? All right, he's doing it for his wife. So in the campaign, now Roosevelt in 1908 goes out and campaigns for Taft. Says everybody should vote for Taft. So Taft is going to win. So during this campaign, Taft's wife, this woman right here, dies of natural causes. So he was going to win the election of a job he doesn't really want. And the whole reason he was doing it was his wife, and she has died. He is also very depressed and struggling with the loss of his wife as he becomes president. So Taft has always been a big boy. All right, he says he's always struggled with weight, but with the stress of being the president, on top of his wife passing away, he's a stress eater. When he becomes president, throughout his time, he progressively gets bigger. This is a picture of Taft that he ends up wait. Now keep in mind, this is the early 1900s. it is very rare for somebody to be this obese. He is the largest president weight-wise we've ever had. He's 350 pounds. Now, there's extremely healthy defensive linemen in the NFL that 350, I don't know if extremely healthy, but 350 pounds, we all have a family member that's 350 pounds. But when I was, I didn't watch my weight when I was in my early 20s, and I got real big, and I was up over 300 pounds. Today that doesn't seem as crazy, but at the time that would be an equivalent of like 500 pounds, maybe like 470 today. Like it was just, people just didn't see people that big. So Taft comes in, but his size is indicative of what he's going through. But no, we don't realize that until long after his life. Of his weight gain was probably indicative of how unhappy he was as the president. So there's another story with Taft. If you type in Taft in Google, here's another story. So I might as well go ahead and tell you about it. Taft is so big because people like to make fun of him for being fat. I feel bad as somebody who struggles with their weight the whole life. I feel bad for the guy, all right? But I gotta tell the story. So Taft is so big that he reportedly once got stuck in the bathtub in the White House, and the Secret Service had to pry him out of his bathtub. And you're like, oh, that's so sad. I'm sure that they don't make too big of a deal out of that. This is a children's book. President Taft stuck in the bath. It is 100%. It is comical. So much so. So this was a problem that they actually had to. And now Taft, he's a good sport about it. Like, he understands his weight. He doesn't hide it. He's a public figure. So if you ask him about his weight, he's going to talk about it. Like, he doesn't get like upset publicly. I mean, obviously he doesn't like everybody talking about his weight and talking about his body, but he realizes he's the president. People are going to talk about it. So he would, so when they would ask him about this, he did point out, and this is a photograph, that this is the tub that he has installed in the White House so he doesn't get stuck. These are the craftsmen of the tub. Like, they take it at the warehouse, and then it's installed in the White House. But yeah, so he's like, make sure that didn't happen again. So there's that. It's actually, while he's president, that story doesn't really come out. It's actually backwards a little bit. He has this big tub installed, and everybody's like, oh, that's really cool. And then they find out later the reason that tub had gotten installed is because he had gotten stuck. So Taft comes in, but now it's all just lovable, fun stuff. Well, it doesn't go well for Taft as the president. So he wants to do things very differently than Roosevelt, who is his best friend. And it's also interesting and important to point out that while he is best friends with Roosevelt, he wants to do things different than Roosevelt. He doesn't necessarily agree with him because he's more of a traditional Republican, all right? And Roosevelt, while he's a Republican, he just kind of did whatever he wanted to do. This here is Taft, all right? And this is supposed to be President Taft's dollar diplomacy. We're going to talk about this. He's putting Teddy's big stick back up on the wall, because Theodore Roosevelt was, walk softly, carry a big stick, is this idea that you intimidate countries with military in order to get what you want. So Taft is like, no, I don't want to do that. Here's what I want to do, is he's going to use this thing called dollar diplomacy. If countries don't like us, we're just going to throw money at them until they do. He's like, everybody loves money. Now, people do love money. And at first, this seems to be really effective. It's going to backfire on them, because what ends up happening is if a country doesn't like us, we give them some money. Oh, that's fine. Oh, we're unhappy with trade. Oh, more money. We're happy with it. Well, what happens when we accidentally blow up one of their ships and kill a bunch of their people? These things happen, all right? That country's really angry. Well, with dollar diplomacy, we're like, okay, $50,000, will that do it? And they're like, what? You just killed people. So $75,000. You blew up a ship because you were being idiots. $90,000 and we're good. Like, it started to appear, because this is exactly what we were doing, instead of taking moral responsibility for what we were doing, we would just throw money at countries until our problems went away. This really upset a lot of countries because it's like we don't value them, like we are treating them as lesser because we have money, so we're above the rules. So dollar diplomacy was actually an attempt for him to move away from military intimidation, but what it ends up doing is it actually just hurts our reputation around the world of just being now we're just financial bullies as opposed to being military bullies. So it's not going well, all right? With Taft. He also he tries to cut taxes but raises others. The economy's not great. Things just aren't going well for Taft, and he's miserable. He hates this job. Then there's a situation called the Ballinger-Pinchot affair. All right, got a little cartoon here, and I'll explain to you what all this cartoon means. So there's two dudes, all right? In the cartoon, this is Ballinger, this is Pinchot. These are two guys that work for Roosevelt. That work for Taft. Well, since they're the same political party, some of these guys are holdovers from the Roosevelt administration, like Pinchot, all right? Well, Pinchot has been doing shady stuff and selling land illegally. Like he's been selling public land. That's just, it's not cool. And he's been embezzling some money. He's been doing some shady stuff. Well, Ballinger, who was a guy that Taft appointed, Ballinger and Pinchot hate each other. Ballinger sees that Pinchot is doing all this shady stuff, and he goes to Taft and is like, hey, Pinchot is doing a whole bunch of bad things, and you got to stop him. Well, the problem is that Pinchot is an appointee by Roosevelt, his best friend. So if he fires Pinchot for this, then it might make Roosevelt here mad. So Taft doesn't do anything. He's like, I'm just going to ignore this because I don't know what to do here, which is not a good sign of a leader. Well, Ballinger is upset that Taft has not done anything to Pinchot, so Ballinger goes public in the newspaper with these accusations of what Pinchot is doing. Now, both of these guys, Ballinger and Pinchot, are high-ranking Republicans. Taft sees all this happening and the Republican Party, and he's supposed to be the head of the Republican Party. I was like, oh my gosh, now it's gotten bad. Now it's gone public. So Taft responds by firing both Pinchot and Ballinger, thinking, hey, if I fire my guy too, as well as Roosevelt won't be mad. Completely backfires on him. Because when he fires both of them, what it does is it makes him appear like a weak leader, that he can't run the White House. So that upsets Roosevelt. Roosevelt's like, what are you doing? I thought we were friends. And it's not so much that you fired my guy. It's, I don't think you do this job well. I made the presidency into this awesome thing and everybody loved it. And now you're just dumping on it. So the Ballinger-Pinchot affair is going to make Taft look really, really weak to the Republican Party. All right. So you got Taft's time as president. It has not gone well. Well, now it's 1912. It is time for re-election. Taft, he's the head of the Republican Party. You kind of are required to run for re-election even if you don't want to. It's very rare that presidents don't. And Taft's like, fine, I'll run. But then, so the Republicans always win. I mean, they're running against Democrats. Republicans are still much more popular than the Democrats. The Democrats don't stand a chance. They only get 40% of the vote, and the Republicans get 60% every time. Well, as Taft is getting ready to run for president, Roosevelt comes back and is like, you know what? I made a mistake. I should have run in 1908. I want to be the nominee for the Republicans. Let me be the new president, and I got it. Now, if Roosevelt runs for president, he's going to win hands down because everybody loves Roosevelt. Well, the Republicans are like, yeah, so everybody loves Roosevelt, and we're sure to win if he runs, but I'm pretty sure we're going to win with Taft too. And Roosevelt is unpredictable. The Republicans have no control over Roosevelt. Some of the stuff Roosevelt does, the Republicans hate, but they have no control over him because he's a Republican in name only. So they're like, yeah, Roosevelt, like everything you did for us, but we're going to stick with Taft. That's our boy, so sorry. Now, Roosevelt doesn't like being told no. So what Roosevelt's going to do, he's going to run for president anyway. So there's Republicans, there's Democrats, and he's going to create his own political party in 1912 and run for president. Now, he creates a political party called the Bull Moose Party. All right. Bull Moose, I guess, is like a male moose. I guess he needed to clarify the gender of the moose. So he is going to run as a third party candidate. Now, he is extremely popular. All right. But usually Republicans are still going to vote Republicans and Democrats are going to vote Democrats. Like, it's really, the chances of him getting enough votes to change his election is almost unheard of. All right. But so he's going to run as a progressive. His whole new political party, his campaign slogan is a square deal all around. And so you can see this is supposed to be the elephant represents the Republicans and the donkey represents the Democrats. And they're shocked that there is now this bull moose, this new third party they have to contend with. Well, in the election, Roosevelt is behind in the polls. So there is an absolutely crazy story that happens. All right. So this is Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. So Teddy Roosevelt realizes he's behind the polls. It's right before the election. So what Roosevelt is going to do is he's going to give one huge final speech. All right. This huge final speech that he's going to give is like right before the election. He's going to try to sway everybody to his side for all the stuff that he wants. So Roosevelt, he's going to speak for like 2 hours. And he's a good speaker, very energetic public. So he's got this. So he gets to his auditorium. It's packed. Now this is his last speech he's going to give. So it's got to be perfect. So he has meticulously written it all out. He has written 50 pages. 50 pages. All right. Of this speech. And so he's sitting backstage, looking over it. Now, Roosevelt isn't going to read off his speech. He has it memorized. But he's backstage. He's got his glasses on. All right. He's got his glasses on here, and he's got his speech he's looking through because he's getting older. So when he needs to read stuff, he has to use his glasses. All right. So he's got his glasses on, looking over it, and they're like, and here's Teddy Roosevelt. And everybody cheers. He's like, all right, it's go time. So what he does, instead of leaving this backstage, is he folds it up. All right. Folds it up like this, big old wad of papers, and he sticks it in his shirt pocket. Actually won't fit in my shirt pocket. And then, in case he needs his glasses, in case he needs to read it out there, because he needs his glasses when he reads, because he's getting older, he takes his glasses, right? He puts them in a little metal case, and he also puts it in his pocket. That's a really big pocket. He shuts his jacket. Whoo! Go time! And he walks out on stage and starts giving his speech. All right? About 15 minutes into his speech, crazy dude shows up. This guy, there's no rhyme or reason what he's getting ready to do. He's going to shoot Theodore Roosevelt. He goes up to the front of the stage, pulls a pistol out, aims, fires, shoots Theodore Roosevelt in the chest. All right. The whole place goes crazy. They go grab the guy and they drag him outside and they beat him up and he's arrested and there's a whole panic like, oh my, like the Theodore Roosevelt just got shot. And then they all look up at the stage and Theodore Roosevelt is still standing up on stage. He's like crumpled over, like he hasn't fallen down yet, and everybody's like silent. Theodore Roosevelt stands up. He opens up his jacket. He is pouring blood out of his chest. He says, it's going to take more than a bullet to stop a bull moose. Shuts his jacket, and gives his speech for another hour and a half. Covered in blood. Like, he just, like, no, you ain't going to shoot me. He's like the Terminator. Then he goes to the hospital and has the bullet removed while giving an interview. Has a bullet removed from his chest while giving an interview to the paper and still makes it to a 6:30 p.m. dinner reservation. Roosevelt just took a bullet in front of everybody like it didn't matter. This is a man who people love because he was a war hero. How popular do you think Roosevelt is now? Oh, he is crazy popular. And this is right before the election. So, I want to show you some pictures. This guy shot him. And you're like, wait, he got shot in the chest? Well, here's why. Remember how he had the paper and he had the glasses and it was wadded up here? The bullet went all the way through all those papers, through the metal outside the glasses case, through the lens of the glasses, outside the other side of the metal glasses case, and stuck in his chest muscle. There is actually Like this is the X-ray of Roosevelt. We're getting new technology now. They didn't have X-rays when McKinley got shot, but now they do for Roosevelt. You can see the bullet here. It just lodged in his. It didn't hit any vital organs. It's absolutely crazy. Now, I would imagine you'd be like, Mr. Wagstaff, this story seems to just be like something you've made up. There's no way it happened like that. This maniac in Milwaukee shoots Colonel Roosevelt. He ignores the wound, speaks an hour, goes to hospital. Absolutely crazy. And you're like, yeah, okay, but we've been talking about yellow journalism. Just because it's in the newspaper doesn't mean that it's true. I like your skepticism, all right? Here's another newspaper also verifying that. Here is his shirt with the bullet hole in it and covered in his blood. This is crazy. So on the election day, everybody's super hyped about Roosevelt. Very surprising because it's Roosevelt versus Taft. Well, here's what ends up happening. There's 7.5 million people cast their vote for either Roosevelt or Taft. The Republicans split their vote. Roosevelt gets 4 million. Taft gets 3.5 million. Roosevelt beats Taft, yay! But everybody forgot about the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson. He got 6.2 million votes. He only won 41% of the popular vote and won in a landslide of 435 electoral votes because all of these states that went blue, probably part of them vote progressive, part of them voted Republican. With the Republicans splitting their vote, this brings a Democrat in as the president, which is Woodrow Wilson. This guy. This is the first Democrat president they've had since before the Civil War. The first Democrat that has won an election since before the Civil War. So Woodrow Wilson comes in as the president, and Woodrow Wilson is very famous for the way he handled World War I, which is a whole unit that we're going to talk about. And he gets a lot of credit for that. Which, and rightfully so. There's a lot of good stuff that he does. Woodrow Wilson, they didn't really think about it that much at the time, but if you look back on it, Woodrow Wilson's kind of a racist. Like, not kind of. He's the one that's going to segregate the military. He's going to do a lot of kind of stuff that gets lost in history because he does do a lot of good stuff. But he ain't all rainbows and sunshine. Looking back on it historically. All right. Let's talk about his foreign policy. So there's a very clear change of what's going to happen with his foreign policy. Foreign policy is how you deal with other countries. So basically, if we didn't like a country, we would just overthrow them until a new government comes in. We do this in Mexico. Like Taft had been messing with it. Roosevelt had been messing with it. This is a little cartoon. It's like Mexican dishes must be seasoned highly. So this is the Mexican policy, and he's putting a lot of force into it. Basically, we instigate revolutions in countries that we don't like their government. They don't like us. We just encourage them to get overthrown and support that, kind of like in Panama and Colombia. After we do this in Mexico, and like we stopped even being sneaky about it. After the Panama situation, after what we do here in Mexico, the rest of the world's like, America, that's not cool. And this is really the first time America is going to be an adult. And we're like, and Woodrow Wilson leads this. He's like, you know what? You're right. We've been doing a bunch of junk that's just not cool. We're, from now on, when we get involved in something, we're going to do it legally and we're going to do it up front. Now, there's always shady stuff that happens behind the scenes, but we're going to attempt, at least publicly, to not try to overthrow countries that we don't like. Unless they're like trying to attack us or something. But if they just won't trade with us, which is like the type of stuff that was happening, we try to get their government overthrown so that they would trade with us better. So Wilson, he also comes in. Wilson's going to lower taxes. He attacks trust. This is really any like monopoly that existed by this point gets wiped out. So Roosevelt had done most of it. Wilson's going to once again come in with a hammer and just eliminate really any existence of monopolies and these robber barons. Not that they aren't still crazy rich. I don't want to talk about getting rid of monopolies and explaining that Rockefeller and Carnegie lost money. They actually made more money, but it also allowed other people to make money. By breaking up their companies into different companies that had to compete with each other to lower prices, more people bought stuff from those companies. Those companies made more money, and then Rockefeller and Carnegie, they owned stock in all those companies and actually made more money after it. So don't be like, oh, but Rockefeller and Carnegie don't lose money. They actually made more money from it. They just don't have this monopoly they can give over to, family from then on. So when they busted up the monopolies, literally it hurt nobody. And this is when the government realized the laissez-faire, just hands off, isn't always the best approach. He's going to create this thing called the Federal Reserve. This is the Federal Reserve building. It's a very, very complicated concept that I'm not going to go through here in a survey course in U.S. history. So here's what you need to know about the Federal Reserve. Know how they're talking about inflation, deflation, and greenbacks, and gold standard, and silver standard, and all those, what are we based on? Well, there's this really complicated thing about basing money on credit, all right? And basing money on our name and our ability to pay, blah, 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 blah. He creates this, all right? It's called the Federal Reserve. It basically gives us a gold backup to our money. We're going to base money on our credit score and use gold as a backup in case our money fails. We can always switch back over to gold. We're one of the only countries on earth that have a backup plan for our money. If our money ceases to exist and everybody realizes it's just random green pieces of paper and doesn't mean anything, we can then switch back over to gold, which is a precious metal that does have value. Because we have a backup plan to our money, it makes our money much stronger because our money's always going to be worth something. If our whole financial institutions collapse, you know what happens to the existing money? The price of it skyrockets because then it's based on gold. That's the Federal Reserve, the backup. The Federal Reserve strengthens our money and makes it the most dominant, consistent money on earth. And even though inflation happens every year, the fact that it is controlled and the Federal Reserve decides how much money is worth every year, it has worked very well since it's gotten created 100 years ago. And Wilson gets credit for that. So the progressive movement can't be mentioned without talking about the 19th Amendment. It's a little out of order because we're getting ready to have a whole World War I, which we'll talk about in a whole nother unit. In World War I, all the men got drafted and got sent off to war. Well, we needed a bunch of stuff made here. Well, women stepped up and went into these factories and did a whole bunch of jobs that used to be done by men. Not only did they produce the same amount that men did, they actually produced more because the expectations were higher to mass produce quicker. Because of that, after World War I, everybody kind of looks around and realizes, why are women not allowed to vote? Why are women being treated as a lesser citizen? The 19th Amendment, created in 1919, that's how you can remember it, 19th Amendment, 1919, gives women the right to vote. Woodrow Wilson, who's at the end of his second term at this point, he said, gives credit to women's efforts in World War I as the reason why women gained the right to vote. It wasn't so much that, hey, women had stepped up their game. It was basically like the society saw what women have been doing, can do, will do, and it was just so prevalent that it just seemed silly not to give women the right to vote. So the 19th Amendment comes out, gives women the right to vote. Life is going to be pretty different in America because now that women have the right to vote, guess who politicians care about? Women. Once a group gets the right to vote, politicians care about them, and the trajectory of America changes from there on. So the 19th Amendment is kind of the end of the progressive era with women gaining the right to vote. All right. That's the end of the unit.